Coming up on New Day at Arirang, South Korea is expected to report a whopping 7,000 new COVID-19 infections Friday. And with that, authorities are set to announce enhancements to the medical system to better tackle the spread of the Omicron variant. The UN Security Council held a closed-door meeting Thursday to discuss North Korea's recent firing of a series of missiles, but they failed to come up with any additional sanctions toward the regime due to opposition from Russia and China. And South Korean President Moon Jae-in held a summit with his Egyptian counterpart on Thursday. The two sides are working on a deal to export South Korea's K-9 howitzers, and they agreed to launch a joint study ahead of a potential FTA.
Hello and welcome to this Friday edition of New Day at Arirang. It's 8 a.m. on January 21st here in Seoul, South Korea. Thank you ever so much for joining us on this last day of the work week. I'm Mark Broom.
And I'm Kim Mo-gan. Over the next hour, we'll take a look at the big news stories of the day and get expert insights on the issues facing Korea and the world.
That's right, and one of the biggest issues facing Korea right now is the COVID-19 situation. New cases may hit 7,000 on this Friday, but some experts are forecasting that number may double in a month or so, with the Lunar New Year holiday coming up at the end of January, as well as the increasingly rapid spread of Omicron.
Now, to fill you in on the details and more updates, we have our reporter Kim Yeon-seung here in the studio with us. Good morning, Yeon-seung.
Good morning.
So, Yeon-seung, like authorities had already said that cases may reach the 7,000 mark today. How likely do you see that happening?
It seems very likely. Up to 9 p.m. Thursday, South Korea reported 5,980 new cases. When the total tally is rounded up, another 1,000 cases may be added and may reach that 7,000 mark. Gyeonggi-do province also hit a fresh high in their 9 p.m. tally and stood at 1,930. They actually reported a record daily case count yesterday, more than 2,400. So we'll see if that region hits another record high in their caseload. Authorities say that all this could potentially mean a fifth wave.
Now, we briefly touched upon it in the introduction, but what are the longer-term projections looking at? Because they don't sound very pretty at all.
Right, so numbers could spike up to 10,000 or to 15,000 in a day in just a month if the country fails to contain the virus. This is according to the Central Disease Control Headquarters. Especially with the Lunar New Year's holiday coming up, it remains absolutely critical to curb the spread during this busy holiday and one that usually sees big family gatherings and cross-country travel.
So, Yeon-seung, you've mentioned that authorities are planning to shift into the different virus response phase. When do you see that happening?
It seems very soon, most likely. Authorities did say last week that they'll pivot into a new virus response when daily cases hit 7,000. But on Thursday, they adjusted and said that this plan will go into action when the daily average reaches 7,000. They haven't yet given a clarification on the specifics in terms of the time frame for calculating the average. But authorities did say they'll announce the details today, so hopefully that will clear up any confusion. Stay tuned to Arirang News because we'll bring you the updates as soon as we can. Also, according to health authorities, the new virus response plans to be faster and more efficient. This new response system will expand at-home recovery, rope in local doctors to help with testing and treatment, and shorten the number of days in isolation. The plan focuses on maximizing efficiency on prevention and treatment while using the current capacity that we have to battle the expected surge of Omicron infections.
And Yeon-seung, just update us on Pfizer's oral COVID-19 treatment. It's been in South Korea for around a week now.
Right, so health authorities will update us on that today as well. They last filled us on filled us in on Wednesday and said that only 39 people had been administered the pill last weekend from Friday to Sunday. That's a pretty low figure, especially considering that the health authorities' original plan was to prescribe the pill to 1,000 people a day from their stock of 21,000 courses. Doctors on the COVID frontline said that they find it rather difficult to prescribe the pill for patients because there are so many medications that are not recommended for use alongside Paxlovid. So we'll see in Friday's announcement if health authorities have kicked up a notch the usage of Paxlovid on the COVID-19 frontlines.
So what about other kinds of treatments? Are they ramping up other treatments because considering the fact that Paxlovid is not used as much as we expect?
Right, so health authorities are expanding the use of remdesivir. The Ministry of Food and Drug Safety granted emergency use of remdesivir, which is an antiviral medication made by Gilead, a biopharmaceutical company, to patients with mild to moderate symptoms of COVID-19. These patients also have to be aged 12 and over and weigh at least 40 kilograms. This intravenous treatment used to be only administered to critically ill patients, but health authorities widened the use to prevent mild cases developing into severe illnesses. They felt confident enough to make this change after reviewing results of clinical trials and by looking at precedents set in Europe.
Right, Yan-seung, thank you so much for your reports throughout the week. We'll see you in the studio again on Monday.
Yes, thank you very much for that update on the situation here in Korea. So around a week has passed since South Korea received its first shipment of Pfizer's oral COVID-19 treatment. Dozens of patients, as we just heard, have already been given the pills.
For more on how Paxlovid is being administered in South Korea, our Choi Min-jung went to a residential treatment center and files us this report.
This COVID-19 patient is being treated with Paxlovid, Pfizer's antiviral drug. He is currently being looked after at a residential treatment center in Seoul and is very close to completing the course of pills.
코로나 치료제 박스로비드를 4일 정도 드셨고 이제 하루 정도 남겨 놓으신 상황인데요. 지금 어떻게 약 드시면서 증상이 많이 좋아지셨나요?
예, 근데 이제 지침이 좀 있던 게 간질간질한 목이 간질간질 그런 게 없어졌고요.
아, 기침을 하시던 게 좀 없어지셨고.
Just like this patient, many people are expected to take the pills in the days and weeks to come. Now let's take a look at how Paxlovid is prescribed and administered. Before prescribing the treatment, doctors first consult with the patients using non-contact methods to check their health. Doctors then use the Drug Utilization Review Program, also known as DUR. This program uses the patient's prescription history to help doctors determine whether or not patients can take the pills. This is important as a total of 28 drug substances are designated as ingredients that should not be taken together with Paxlovid. If the patient is eligible and is willing to receive the treatment, the medicine is administered twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening. And medical workers regularly monitor patients' health conditions after they take the pills. The director at this treatment center expressed optimism over the drug's potential to become a game changer amid the rapid spread of the Omicron variant.
I believe that Paxlovid will play a crucial role in preventing moderate cases from becoming severe. Studies have shown that the treatment is around 90% effective, so it will be essential in times when infections are increasing due to Omicron.
Unlike the relatively slow initial vaccine rollout, South Korea was able to become one of the first nations in the world to administer the COVID-19 pills. The first shipment of Paxlovid arrived last week. And over the first 3 days after arrival, a total of 39 people have taken the pills, with no reports of side effects as of Sunday. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the Japanese government is placing Tokyo and a dozen more regions in the country under tougher COVID-19 curbs as Japan is experiencing a massive resurgence in new infections. Min Soo-kyun with the details.
Starting Friday, tighter rules known as quasi-emergency measures will be in place for about 3 weeks in 13 Japanese prefectures, including Tokyo. The decision comes as Omicron continues to drive record cases in the country.
The government would like to place quasi-emergency measures in these 13 prefectures as urged by its local governors. Firstly, we believe local offices need to prepare further to be able to operate the medical system they've set up. Secondly, put in place robust measures to contain the rising number of cases.
The new rules essentially allow each region to decide what measures to take. But it's widely expected it will include limiting business hours at bars and restaurants. Infections are spreading fast in Japan, with 46,200 new cases reported on Thursday alone. Japan has been reporting fresh records for 3 straight days. On the same day, Tokyo also posted another record high of more than 8,600 new cases. While almost 80% of Japan's population is fully vaccinated, less than 2% have received a booster shot. In a bid to contain the virus, Japan has been suspending entry of all foreign visitors from late November last year. Many people have expressed discontent over this stringent virus measure, with some even asking Japan to stop xenophobia. The Japanese government, however, plans to keep the entry ban on non-resident foreigners until the end of February. Min Suk-hyun, Arirang News.
The US proposal to slap new UN sanctions on North Korea following its latest series of missile launches have been put on ice after it was blocked by both China and Russia. Kim Hyo-sun with more.
China and Russia on Thursday blocked America's bid to impose new sanctions on North Korea in response to regime's latest missile launches. The move came ahead of a closed-door UN Security Council meeting on North Korea, the second in just 2 weeks. Following the launches over the past few weeks, Washington imposed unilateral sanctions against North Korean individuals and entities. It then proposed 5 of those individuals also be subject to UN sanctions. While the request had to be agreed to by all 15 members of the Security Council, Beijing and Moscow placed a hold on the proposal, leaving it in limbo. China reportedly said it needs more time to look through the proposal, while Russia said more evidence is needed to back the U.S. request. The U.S. ambassador to the UN on Thursday stressed the need for the Security Council to respond to the regime's launches.
Everyone. We also call on member states to implement Security Council resolutions to which the Security Council unanimously agreed, and which calls on the DPRK to abandon its weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missile programs in a complete, verifiable, and irreversible manner. It is extremely important that member states take the necessary steps to implement the sanctions in their jurisdictions or risk providing a blank check for the DPRK regime to advance a weapons program.
Linda Thomas-Greenfield then reiterated Washington's desire to hold talks with the regime, saying it's willing and prepared to talk at any time. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. COVID-19 is on most people's minds, but unfortunately we have to inform you that it's also norovirus season. Norovirus is a very common stomach bug in a great many countries, including here in South Korea. Sometimes it's referred to as the winter vomiting bug. It is extremely contagious, so it spreads very easily in environments such as schools, hospitals and other tightly packed and enclosed areas. You can fall foul of it at any time of the year, but it is much more common to see people coming down with it during the colder winter months, and we are slap bang in the middle of that here in South Korea.
So if a new variant of COVID-19 wasn't enough to worry about, we have to be on guard against this nasty bug that can lay us out for days. For more on this, we're joined by Dr. Bruce Lee, Professor of Health Policy and Management at the City University of New York. Good morning, Dr. Lee.
Good morning.
So, Doctor, for viewers who want to be alert about the symptoms of the norovirus, can you describe what they are and how does this virus normally spread, and can we easily tell it's different from COVID-19?
Yeah, so there's a reason why it's called the winter vomiting bug, because severe vomiting and nausea are hallmarks of it. You can have different types of GI symptoms. You can have diarrhea. So basically GI symptoms. And you can tell the difference between norovirus and COVID-19 because it's primarily GI. Now, of course, COVID-19 can have GI symptoms, but with norovirus, you don't tend to have respiratory symptoms or some of the more odd symptoms that you have with COVID-19, like loss of taste and smell and things like that.
Okay, it doesn't sound very pleasant. I'm pretty sure I've never had norovirus before, so perhaps I'm one of the lucky ones. But how long does it generally take for a relatively healthy person to recover from it? And as a doctor, is it advisable to just try and see it through at home, or should you, in certain cases, go to the hospital?
Yeah, usually you can see through it at home, and the symptoms can last from a couple days to a week, depending on your situation. But the key thing is you want to make sure that you don't get dehydrated, because this is unlike other types of vomiting diseases. People will report very severe vomiting and severe nausea, and it can range in terms of length. But you really want to make sure that you're well hydrated. So there's usually no need to go to the hospital unless you're having problems like that.
So, well, it's better not to get caught, but for those who unfortunately get caught, do you have any specific tips on how to make the experience a little bit more comfortable? Because I hear that some of the best ways could be just rest up and drink as much as you can.
Exactly. You want to keep very well hydrated, because the biggest risk is you get dehydrated, and then that, of course, can affect the rest of your body. And that can either, if you're healthy, it can affect you. You can have problems in terms of dizziness and lightheadedness and losing volume. But like if you have other types of illnesses, it can actually exacerbate those things. Like it can make heart disease or any other types of problems worse. And so you just want to be very careful about that.
Now, finally, you are based in New York, and that's been hit particularly hard by COVID-19 and has really put an enormous strain on the city and the wider state's healthcare system. Are officials there concerned that this kind of double whammy of COVID-19, in addition to norovirus, could put an extra strain on the healthcare systems? And are certain countermeasures already in place to potentially deal with this?
Yeah, that's a big concern, because we have to remember during the winter, there's all sorts of different bugs, other types of pathogens that are circulating. So certainly the flu, you've got norovirus that's a concern. You've got other types of things like respiratory syncytial virus, RSV. So all of these things can add up and really overtax hospitals and healthcare systems. So one of the challenges in New York is really trying to create that extra capacity, because over the years, many of the hospitals have been running at full capacity, trying to save costs. But we can't do that. We can't have that type of situation. We need extra buffer capacity.
All right, Dr. Lee, we appreciate you making time for us today. Thank you so much for your efforts. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in held a summit with his Egyptian counterpart on Thursday to discuss ways to bolster defense and economic cooperation. The two sides are working on a deal to export South Korea's K-9 howitzers, and they agreed to launch a joint study for an FTA. Our senior Blue House correspondent Kim Min-ji, who's traveling with the president, follows us this report from Cairo.
South Korea and Egypt are in negotiations to export Seoul's K-9 Thunder self-propelled howitzers to Cairo. Following a summit with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on Thursday, President Moon Jae-in said the two sides are working toward a final conclusion. Eyes are on whether a deal could be reached before Moon wraps up his three-day visit on Friday.
우리 두 정상은 지금 논의되고 있는 K-9 자주포 계약이 양국 간 상호 신뢰에 기반한 방산 협력의 성과로서 K9 자주포가 이집트군 전력 정강에 크게 기여함과 동시에 기술 협력, 현지 생산을 통한 한 이집트 간 상생 협력의 대표적 성공 사례가 될 것이라는 데 의견을 같이 하고
The leaders also agreed to a joint feasibility study for a bilateral free trade deal to expand their scope of cooperation in future-oriented and sustainable areas based on their comprehensive cooperative partnership. If signed, it would be South Korea's first FTA with an African nation.
광범위한 FTA 네트워크와 젊은 인구 구조, 풍부한 자원까지 갖춰 발전 가능성이 무궁무진합니다.
South Korea also pledged $1 billion through the Economic Development Cooperation Fund, which provides low-interest loans. It'll be used to fund various projects like expanding Egypt's transport infrastructure. The two sides inked MOUs under which South Korea will join the modernization project of Egypt's Luxor High Dam Railway, while another calls for cooperation in the eco-friendly mobility sector.
한국의 개발 경험을 나누고 이집트의 교통, 수자원, 인프라 확충에 힘을 보탤 것입니다.
To mark his visit, President Moon also gave a written interview with one of Egypt's daily newspapers, Al Ahram. He said he was optimistic about working with Egypt to increase mutual benefits, saying Seoul and Cairo are entry hubs into the Asian and African markets, respectively. President Moon also called for support from Egypt for the Korean Peninsula peace process. Looking at the current situation, President Moon said it won't be easy, as the road to peace hasn't been institutionalized yet. However, he vowed sincere efforts right until the end of his term in May. President Moon's visit to Egypt is the first by a South Korean leader in 16 years. It's the final leg of his week-long tour that also took him to Saudi Arabia and the UAE. President Moon says Egypt's future is bright, hoping that Seoul can be by Cairo's side to open a new chapter for bilateral cooperation. He also expressed hope that the two countries can take their relations to another level when they mark 30 years of diplomatic relations in 2025. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News, Cairo.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has warned Russia it'll face serious consequences from the U.S. and its allies if it engages in further aggression against Ukraine. Following a meeting with his UK, French, and German counterparts in Berlin Thursday, Blinken also stressed that no matter which path Moscow takes, the U.S. stands shoulder to shoulder with its allies. Meanwhile, the U.S. Treasury Department has slapped sanctions on 4 Ukrainian officials for their intimate involvement in disinformation of efforts by Russia's Federal Security Service. The 4 included 2 current members of Ukraine's parliament.
Former South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-wha, who's running for the top job at the International Labour Organization, has expressed her ambition to make the world a better place again. Speaking at the ILO HQ in Geneva on Thursday, Kang said the world is experiencing deepening inequality and weakening solidarity that was brought on by a crisis caused by a number of global issues, including the pandemic. She added she'll support a job-oriented economic recovery and work to strengthen social security systems. Kang is up against 4 other candidates from Australia, Togo, France and South Africa. The victorious candidate will be announced on March 25th. As part of efforts to achieve carbon neutrality by the year 2050, the city of Seoul has announced plans to make buildings more eco-friendly. Through 2026, the city will renovate 1 million homes and buildings, which includes interest-free financing for energy-efficient improvements. It'll also add infrastructure to boost the number of electric vehicles to 400,000, or about 10% of all cars on the capital streets. The plan will cost around $8.4 billion by 2026. The goal is to reduce emissions from 2005 levels by 30%. Korean celebrities and singers are meeting their fans in the metaverse and even holding concerts there as well. The virtual world is also being used to forge new stars. Even regular people can audition online in a bid to become the next K-pop sensation. Kim Bok-young with this report.
Auditions for idol groups no longer just take place in the real world. People are choosing the next trending celebrities in the virtual world by watching a series of talented virtual avatars played by online broadcast streamers. One of the hottest virtual idol groups is 이세계 Idol, a 6-member girl group that debuted last December after passing auditions held by a well-known Twitch streamer.
국내 최초 버추얼 아이돌 오디션 이세계 아이돌 프로젝트 오늘 오디션 그 첫날
이세계 Idol debuted with the song Rewind, and they are mesmerizing fans, already almost hitting 3 million views for their official YouTube music video. The streamer behind the project says their next song could be released by the end of February. And they aren't the first virtual K-pop stars. Riot Games, the studio best known for League of Legends, used the opening ceremony of the game's 2018 World Championship final to unveil virtual K-pop group KDA. The video for the 4-member group's debut song Pop Stars has been viewed almost 500 million times. An insider says people who are not game players have also become fans of the group, and as the reason behind such success is nothing but the essentials.
We believe the neat song itself was the main reason. We benchmarked K-pop songs, catching K-pop lovers' attention. Unique storytelling, too, has played a big part. League of Legends has around 150 characters with their own universe and characteristics, along with storytelling. KDA Group, too, has stories for each of the 4 members.
The new trend has gone even further with the creation of an AI idol group. AI graphic company Pulse9 brought life to Eternity, an 11-piece girl group made from hyper-realistic virtual characters. The girls were chosen from the faces of 101 girls online by internet users and were brought to life using artificial intelligence. Culture critics say Generation Z especially has a strong tendency to just enjoy virtual reality, no matter whether it is real or not. As the virtual world becomes the new normal, eyes are on whether it will become the mainstream in the entertainment industry. 김보경, 아리랑 뉴스.
Welcome to Dialogue This Week. In this corner, we invite guests from in and out of Korea to talk about a wide variety of issues, ranging from culture and sports to the latest trends around the world. The last few days in South Korea have been quite chilly, with snow falling in many parts of the country. But despite the freezing temperatures over the winter, the sizzling heat seems to be even worse over the summer season. In fact, October of 2021 was globally the 3rd warmest October on record, only marginally cooler than October of 2015 and 2019 rather, which are all within the last decade. November of last year was the 5th warmest November on record. All in all, the latest data released by the Copernicus Climate Change Service showed that the last 7 years have been the 7 hottest years on record. So why are we seeing such an increase in temperatures, and what can we do to stop climate change? For a more in-depth discussion on this, we have Vincent Henri Puke, head of the European Union's Copernicus Atmosphere Monitoring Service, who's also the deputy director of the Copernicus Department at the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts via Skype. Good morning, Director Puke. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
So we've been consistently hearing about global warming for the last couple of decades. But for starters, can you remind us of why this is a serious problem and why we need to be conscious of global temperatures rising?
First of all, maybe it would be more accurate to speak about global climate change, because the situation is that we observe today and that we expect in the future can be substantially different between the different regions of the world. Now, of course, overall, if you make an average, what we observe is a warning of about 1.1 to 1.2 degrees compared to the middle of the 19th century, when we have the first meteorological measurements. So this may seem very little, 1.1 degree, but it is certainly not. what changes is not only the average, but also all the full distributions of temperature. So it means that the probability of having severe droughts or heat waves is considerably increased, as well as we observe the occurrence of extreme weather events. So it is really serious, and actually most countries in the world have agreed in Paris a few years ago to limit this change to between 1.5 and 2 degrees. That is for keeping our planet in a state that is not too different from the one that we've been experiencing in the last decades.
So when you say that global temperatures are rising, is this necessarily referring to air temperatures? How exactly is it measured and forecasted?
Yes, the climate reports generally focus on the surface air temperature, or the air temperature at 2 meters at the global scale. This temperature is measured, has been measured for 150 years or more from the ground, and increasingly from boats, from aircraft, and over the last 40 years from satellite. And what we do in Copernicus is to use exactly the same processing tools as weather forecasting. We use all these sources of information, ground, ships, aircraft, satellites, and we can provide a fully consistent global picture. We tend to call them maps with no gaps. So that we have the most accurate figure. And as a matter of fact, there may be 4 or 5 centers in the world with slightly different methods aiming at calculating this global temperature, and we get to very, very similar results. So it means that we can be really confident about the fact that the temperature has risen by 1.2 degree, which is consistent with what we know of the laws of physics, considering the increase of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere.
So it seems like a very precise way of measuring the temperature. But alongside air temperature, the Copernicus Atmosphere Monitoring Service, or CAMS, the agency where you're based in, also reported that atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations, which largely refer to carbon dioxide and methane concentrations, continue to rise as well. So it's a known fact that governments around the world have been setting and renewing greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets. But why are we seeing a decreasing? Why aren't we seeing a decreasing trend yet? Are these goals just not enough? What's your opinion on this?
Yes, so we've been observing over the last 50 years, since there are measurements, an increase in greenhouse gases, CO2 and methane, and 2021 was no exception in that, with substantial increases. And in fact, it's not a surprise. I will take the analogy of a bath which is full of water. So the level of water is the concentration of the greenhouse gases, and the new emissions of the year is the tap of water, the fresh water. So even if you reduce the tap of water, if there is no drain, basically the water will keep increasing. And that's what we've been seeing even last year in 2020, where the lockdown measures relative to COVID were taken. We estimate that emissions of CO2 have been reduced by about 5.4% over the year at the global scale, which means that 95% of the emissions have still been emitted. So the water tap has still been bringing water into the bath, and so the water level has increased. The crucial aspect of the problem is that greenhouse gases in the atmosphere stay for a very long time. One molecule of CO2 will stay for 100 years. And because of that very long time in the atmosphere, the effect of changes in emissions is only effective if it is substantial and over a large number of years. So we could not see signs of changes, which is not because the countries are not making efforts, but it's simply that these efforts are maybe not strong enough and have not been in place for long enough for affecting really the levels of greenhouse gases.
So let's just hope for more could be done on the issue. But Director, just last year alone, the U.S. was hit by a historic drought that came with record-breaking heat waves, which led to wildfires that burned nearly 7.7 million acres of land. And it seems like these wildfires are getting harder to fight. So this is all the more concerning because it was reported that carbon emissions from wildfires worldwide amounted to 1,850 megatons last year only. So how bad is the impact of these wildfires? Are there other countries that are fighting as many wildfires as the United States too?
Yes, unfortunately, we've been observing in recent years and in 2021 alone a number of unprecedented wildfire. The one I will mention is in northeastern Siberia, the Sakha Republic region, which has seen raging fires in the summer months. There was also lots of fires around the Mediterranean area in August. And if we go a little bit further in the past, we remember massive fires last year in Australia, or if we go even further back in 2015, 2016 in Indonesia. So wildfires can be really devastating. The ones in California have been particularly extreme this year and last year, but it's a worldwide concern.
Well, it seems like the vicious cycle of rising temperatures causing more wildfires and bigger and more frequent wildfires worsening global warming continues. But from where you see things, is there a possible solution to this?
First of all, maybe I will surprise you by saying that the total amount of carbon emissions from wildfires has decreased, in fact, in the world in the last 20 years, for which we have data. This is because fires, which are increasing in other parts of the world, are decreasing actually in the tropical areas, which are the largest sources of emissions. But even if the global figure is decreasing, it does not mean that there is no problem. Fires are dramatic in several regions. And climate change also is only part of the story. Climate change will provide conditions that are more conducive for fires because weather is hotter, the soil is drier. But in order to have fire, you need also ignition. And ignition is often caused by humans. And preventing ignition is also very important in the case of fire. For instance, the Dixie Fire, this very large fire that took place in California, started just next to a road. And unfortunately, this is probably not a coincidence. So there is a solution about fire, which is to be ever more vigilant about ignition of fires by voluntary or involuntary human action.
Now, Director, another climate issue I want to touch upon is the Antarctic ozone hole. The Antarctic ozone hole of 2021 closed just before Christmas, setting yet another record of being one of the largest and longest-lived holes. So CAMS tracks the development and recovery of these holes every year. Can you help us understand where these ozone holes fit into our fight against climate change and what causes them? And what does it mean that the ozone hole increases in size and longevity?
Yes, the ozone hole events is connected to climate change and is not connected to climate change. Let me explain. So in the 40s and the 50s, we started producing compounds called the chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs. And these products have made their way into the high atmosphere, so what we call the stratosphere, that's between 10 and 50 kilometers of altitude. And in the 80s, it has become apparent that there was this phenomenon of ozone hole, where a large quantity of ozone was destroyed at the very beginning of the spring. So in Antarctica, this is in September. And the root cause of this destruction of ozone, seasonal destruction of ozone, was traced back to these CFCs. As a result, as soon as this was discovered, the countries of the world agreed in 1987, the so-called Montreal Protocol, to ban these emissions of CFCs. So that was, I think, a first decision from all the countries in the world to ban certain manufactured products because of their impact on the environment. The issue is that it takes extremely long for the atmosphere to get rid of these chemicals, and we don't expect the return to normal before the 2060s only.
Wow, 2060s. Well, now, Director, it's become evident that COVID-19 pandemic has had some impact on air quality, climate, and consequently the weather. So can you tell us what some of the impact has been?
Yes, so the impact that have been most visible are most probably on air quality. The reason is that air quality involves pollutants which are fairly short-lived, as opposed to the greenhouse gases that I was mentioning, which means that as soon as you change emissions, you will see changes in the atmosphere. So, for instance, one of the key pollutants, nitrogen dioxide, NO2, for which about half of the emissions comes from car traffic, was cut down very substantially. We talk of figures about 30 to 50% during the lockdown periods, mostly in 2020. And during this period, we could see that air quality improved. And we did a study over Europe where we could quantify that in the period March to July 2020, 800 lives were saved because air quality levels had been improved in the meantime. So air quality reacts immediately. In terms of climate and weather, the impacts were way less noticeable. I mentioned that CO2 emissions were reduced by about 5.4% in 2020 compared to 2019. So fairly limited impact on climate and on weather, actually. The biggest impact that we've been looking into was the fact that we lost lots of observations from commercial aircraft due to the shutdown of most aircraft lines. Commercial aircraft do provide lots of meteorological observations, and we were fearing that the quality of the weather forecast would be deteriorating because of that. In the end, we managed to use additional satellite observations, and the weather forecasts were not that changed. So in the end, not that many impact on climate and weather, neither on the quality of the forecast.
Now, Director, before we let you go, the Copernicus service is mostly used at government levels as well as commercial corporate levels. I must ask, is it also a resource for private individuals? And in another note, like, what can private individuals do to also, contribute to stopping climate change as well?
Copernicus tagline is the eyes on the Earth, and it has been a decision from the European Union to make all the data free and open, following examples from other parts of the world. It comes from the fact that there is a realization that the value of the investment is much bigger if you make all this data free and you share them with public institutions, with private companies, and down to any citizens. So Copernicus data today, as a result, is flowing to many citizens. When you look at air quality bulletins over big international broadcast channels on your smartphones, very often you will have a first layer which comes from Copernicus, mostly because it's operational, which means that every day, 24/7, there is information. It's combining information from ground sensors and from satellites. And basically, it makes environmental topics, air quality, greenhouse gases, as ubiquitous as weather information that today everybody is used to have in her or his pocket. And knowing about the state of the environment, knowing about the state of air quality, looking that our own actions can make a difference, I think is a very important step so that everyone can take measures at individual scales, but also give some more support to the government to actively combat climate change and curb CO2 emissions.
All right, I will keep that in mind. Director Puke, I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up. Thank you so much for your insights. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. At least 29 people, including 11 children and 8 pregnant women, are dead in Liberia after a deadly stampede at a Christian ceremony in the capital Monrovia on Wednesday night. The stampede occurred when a gang armed with knives began attacking some of the hundreds attending the event. According to a police spokesman, the death toll is expected to rise as a number of people are in critical condition. One person linked to the attack has been arrested. Former Pope Benedict XVI is accused of failing to take action against clerics in 4 cases of alleged sex abuse in his archdiocese when he was the Archbishop of Munich. According to a report released Thursday, there were at least 497 victims of abuse, mainly young males from 1945 to 2019. A Munich law firm, which has been investigating the allegations, noted that many other cases had probably not been reported, while the former pope had ignored the abuses.
In all cases, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI strictly rejects any misconduct on his part. Essentially, he claims a lack of knowledge of the facts and a lack of relevance under canon law. In doing so, he continues to claim ignorance even when, in our opinion, it is difficult to reconcile this with the facts of the case.
The latest report comes as Germany's Catholic Church in 2018 apologized to victims after a report found that clerics had abused around 3,700 victims in a span of 7 decades. Last year, another report against the Archdiocese of Cologne between 1975 and 2018 found 202 cases of abuse and 314 victims. Regarding the latest investigation, the Vatican, without mentioning the former pope, said it would evaluate the full report and examine its details. At the young age of 19, British-Belgian teenager Zara Rutherford becomes the youngest woman to fly solo around the world on Thursday, and the first person to do so in a microlight plane. The trip, which took 5 months through 5 continents, saw her fly some 51,000 kilometers before landing in Belgium. And after months of flying, Rutherford was just happy to complete the journey.
It's just really crazy. I haven't quite processed it, I think. I mean, coming here, I was basically in tears, just trying to imagine what it'd be like to finally be home after 5 months. And even this flight wasn't easy, so I'm just super happy.
The teen received her pilot's license in 2020 after training with her father since she was 14. She now dreams of becoming an astronaut, but most importantly, hopes her voyage will encourage more women in science, technology, and aviation. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning. Hope you're well bundled up. It's as cold as yesterday morning with cold alerts, but highs will rise fast and we can expect relief from this ongoing biting cold this afternoon. And you know, this morning could be the last bone-chilling morning of the season. But as soon as the relief arrives, the dust level rises. Some western regions will have high levels of ultrafine dust for most of the day, while regions in the southeast continues to be under dry advisory. Mostly sunny skies will dominate much of the country. Chuncheon starting the day at minus 13 degrees Celsius, Daejeon at minus 9 degrees. But by the afternoon, highs will jump 10 to 15 degrees higher than today's morning lows, and Daejeon will go up to 7 degrees. Chuncheon and Seoul topping out at 4 degrees Celsius. Warming trend continues for most regions, but brace for high levels of dust, while south coast and east coast could see rain or snow on Sunday. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all we have for now. Mark and I will be back at 8 a.m. Korea time next Monday for our next edition of New Day at Arirang. I'm Kim Mo-gyan.
And I'm Mark Brim. Have a wonderful weekend wherever in the world you're watching us. And thank you as always for joining us as well. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.